How often do dismissive avoidants cheat? Let's talk about something that most people wonder, but few actually understand. How often do dismissive avoidants cheat? When you're dating someone who seems emotionally detached, self-sufficient, and hard to reach, it's natural to question their loyalty. After all, they rarely express affection, avoid deep emotional conversations, and seem to live in their own world. So does that emotional distance mean they're more likely to cheat? Or does it actually make them less likely? The truth is far more complicated than a simple yes or no. Because when it comes to dismissive avoidance, cheating isn't just about sex. It's about power, fear, and emotional control. Dismissive avoidants are people who value independence above everything. They've often grown up in environments where emotions were minimized, affection was withheld, or vulnerability was seen as weakness. So as adults, they cope by learning to rely only on themselves. They believe, consciously or unconsciously, that depending on others will lead to disappointment or loss of control. In relationships, this creates an emotional wall. They keep their partners at arm's length. They'll say things like, "I just need space," or "I'm not good at expressing feelings." They might appear calm and detached while their partner is anxiously trying to connect. And here's where the cheating question becomes tricky, because avoidance often feels suffocated when someone gets too close, yet lonely when left alone. That inner tension can push them towards seeking connection elsewhere, but only under very specific emotional conditions. Studies show that dismissive avoidants aren't necessarily the most likely attachment style to cheat. In fact, anxious, preoccupied individuals may cheat out of fear of abandonment or craving attention. Avoidants, however, cheat for a different reason. It's not about needing emotional reassurance. It's about maintaining control. They may cheat when they feel their partner is becoming too close or too needy, using infidelity as a way to create emotional distance. For them, cheating can feel like a subconscious act of self-preservation. By creating distance through betrayal, they can avoid feeling trapped or dependent. In a strange way, cheating can reaffirm their illusion of independence. I can't be controlled. I don't belong to anyone. But here's the other side of the coin. Many dismissive avoidants actually don't cheat. Not because they're deeply loyal romantics, but because cheating requires a level of emotional involvement that they often avoid altogether. Physical intimacy can feel invasive for them. They may avoid deep sexual or romantic entanglements simply because they're uncomfortable with closeness. So ironically, some avoidants remain faithful, not out of moral conviction, but out of emotional self-protection. Their detachment shields them from temptation. They may fantasize or flirt in subtle ways, but they rarely chase passion. To them, emotional and sexual intensity feels dangerous, too unpredictable, too vulnerable. Now, when dismissive avoidants do cheat, it's rarely spontaneous. It's often premeditated or emotionally detached. They might engage in affairs that feel safe, with someone who doesn't expect much, or with someone emotionally unavailable like themselves. The cheating isn't necessarily driven by love or lust. It's driven by fear of closeness or a need to escape emotional responsibility. For example, if their partner confronts them about the lack of intimacy or emotional availability, instead of facing the discomfort, they might turn to someone who doesn't challenge them emotionally. It's their way of saying, "I still have control. I can connect without being consumed." But the aftermath of cheating for a dismissive avoidant is often cold and confusing. Unlike other attachment styles, they rarely show guilt in obvious ways. They compartmentalize. They separate the act from the emotion, rationalizing it as something that just happened. They may even blame their partner subtly, saying things like, "You were always pushing me," or "I needed space." Deep down, though, avoidants do feel guilt and shame. They just don't know how to process it. So instead, they withdraw further, isolate, or shut down emotionally. Their guilt often manifests as even more distance, creating a vicious cycle that pushes their partner away completely. Here's something most people don't realize. Cheating for avoidance isn't always physical. Emotional cheating is where they often hide. They may confide in someone new, flirt online, or build secret emotional bonds that allow them to feel seen without the vulnerability of direct intimacy. They might share their thoughts or frustrations with someone outside the relationship, not because they want a new romance, but because it feels easier to express emotion at a distance. The screen, the flirtation, the secrecy, it all provides control. Emotional cheating lets them escape without the risks of true exposure. And for many avoidant types, that can be even more damaging to a relationship than physical infidelity. Now, if you've been with a dismissive avoidant and you're wondering, did they cheat or would they? It's important to understand their internal logic. They don't cheat out of impulsivity or constant desire. They cheat out of emotional avoidance. They fear losing autonomy. They fear being consumed by love. So when they feel cornered, their instinct is to detach. And sometimes cheating is just another form of escape. However, when they feel genuinely respected, not pressured, and emotionally safe, many avoidants remain loyal. They don't like drama. They don't want the emotional chaos that cheating brings. For them, peace and independence matter more than passion. So if you provide that balance, space, trust, and acceptance, you reduce the emotional triggers that make them run. It's also worth noting that gender and cultural differences can influence how often dismissive avoidants cheat. Men with avoidant attachment styles may externalize their detachment through physical infidelity, pursuing short-term sexual encounters that don't require emotional connection. Women with avoidant traits, on the other hand, might lean toward emotional affairs, building quiet bonds or flirtations that make them feel seen without surrendering control. But across both, the pattern is the same. The moment emotional intimacy feels threatening, they look for outlets that feel safer, but more detached. So how often do dismissive avoidants actually cheat? Statistically speaking, not as much as people think, but emotionally they may disconnect just as deeply. Their version of cheating may not always involve another person's body, but it often involves the slow erosion of intimacy. The moment they shut down, the relationship becomes a ghost town. Two people physically together, but emotionally miles apart. That disconnection feels like betrayal, even if no affair ever happened. Because in emotional terms, avoidants cheat not just with people, but with their distance, their silence, and their refusal to let love in. If you're with a dismissive avoidant, the key is not to chase or accuse, but to observe. Are they pulling away because they're overwhelmed or because they're investing elsewhere? The difference lies in emotional engagement. A withdrawing avoidant who still communicates or returns after space may not be cheating. They're just protecting themselves. But an avoidant who becomes secretive, dismissive, and emotionally cold while denying accountability is likely in self-defense mode, possibly hiding something. The moment they start minimizing your concerns or flipping the blame, you're no longer in a partnership. You're in a psychological standoff. The truth is, dismissive avoidants don't cheat because they're inherently bad people. They cheat because they never learn to stay when love becomes uncomfortable. They mistake vulnerability for danger, closeness for control. But the real tragedy is that every time they run, they confirm their deepest fear, that intimacy only leads to pain. They never stay long enough to experience the safety that comes after openness. So while avoidants might not cheat as frequently as popular belief suggests, when they do, it's not about lust. It's about protection. It's their emotional armor in disguise. And here's the final insight. When dismissive avoidants heal, when they learn that love doesn't have to mean losing themselves, they can become some of the most faithful, stable partners. Because once they feel safe, they stop running. They stop sabotaging. They stop confusing distance with safety. But until then, their relationship patterns will always circle around one question: how can I feel close without being trapped? And that question, left unanswered, is the real cause behind most of their betrayals.